Oh my gosh, that's all I've ever wanted to do, ever since I was a little kid. I mean, I learned to read really early, and I really liked, my favorite thing was ghost stories and stuff like that. And I said, that's what I want to do. I want to write ghost stories. I want to scare people. And that's pretty much, I mean, I tried to do it when I was younger. I didn't think I wanted to go to school for it. I ended up being a graphic designer, but I kept writing the whole time. And then, when the whole indie publishing boom came out of the whole self-publishing, I kind of thought, man, well, now I can really do this. So for the probably past 10 years, I've been putting out all my own stuff and just writing stuff. And then a few years ago, I got into because I started out doing horror fiction. But the last couple of years, I got into doing paranormal nonfiction. And that's really kind of opened a lot of doors because a lot of people are into that, which I didn't really know. And I got hooked up with a parapsychologist and started writing about his cases. And after that, we just started getting interviewed for podcasts and all kind of stuff. So everybody loves the ghost stories. But yeah, that's all I ever want to do is be a writer. So living the dream. I think I wrote it in the 80s, and it was most of a novel. It was kind of an Anne Rice ripoff, and I thought it was good at the time, and then I kind of read it back later. I'm like, oh my god, it was so bad. But then it was kind of like Twilight, really, like way before Twilight. And I was like, I'm throwing this all away. I'm throwing it all away. So I threw out the first book that I wrote because I just thought it was awful. But probably the first one I wrote that I actually liked, that I went ahead and published later, was The Five Poisons. And that was kind of the first novel that I finished, because I like short stories better. That's kind of my preferred medium, because if I try to write a novel, I lose track of stuff, and I start forgetting what I wrote before, because I kind of have a little bit of ADD. So that was the first novel that I finished that I actually, when I read it back, I was kind of like, yeah, that's all right. That's not terrible. So, and actually it ended up being one of my favorite novels after writing all the other stuff that I wrote. The first book I remember, oh, you know what? I don't know if this was the first one I ever read, but it's the first one that I read that I remember really well, was Edward Gorey, or it wasn't Edward Gorey, he did the illustrations. It was John Belair's The House with a Clock in Its Walls. And it's about a little boy who lives in Michigan. His parents die, and he goes to live with his uncle, and his uncle is a wizard, and his next door neighbor is a witch, and they live in like this really old house with all this, and there's an evil wizard who had put this clock behind the wall of this house, like a magical clock, and it was counting down until doomsday. So this little kid and his uncle had to figure out how to find this clock and stop it, like before the world ended. And that book made such a huge impression. And I'm not really sure why, but it's just everything about it was so cool. And I read it over and over again when I was a kid. And actually, a couple years ago, I found it was actually a trilogy. It ended up being a trilogy, but the first one was, the only one that I liked a lot. And I ended up finding the whole trilogy at Barnes & Noble, like in one book, and I bought it all, and I read it again as an adult, and it's still awesome. And it was, oh my god, it's just the best book. I wish they would make a movie out of it, actually. Today I have The Five Poisons, which is my novel, and I also have one called The Associated Villainies, which is a short story collection. And I have one called The Rochdale Poltergeist, which is a paranormal nonfiction, and that's a poltergeist case that took place in 1996. And it was investigated by Steve Mara, who's a parapsychologist. He's been a parapsychologist in the UK for about 35 years, and he's a friend of mine. And so I've written about a couple of his cases. But yeah, he investigated this case in 96 where it was raining inside these people's house. And so he went to investigate it, and he couldn't really find any rational explanation. So yeah, paranormal activity was going on there. But yeah, so those are the only ones. I have a bunch of other ones, but those are the only ones I have with me today. Shirley Jackson. Shirley Jackson. Because she wrote my very, very favorite, still to this day, my very favorite haunted house novel, The Haunting of Hill House. And Haunted House books, haunted house movies, that is my favorite genre out of all the horror subgenres. So, but she wrote so many great books. We've Always Lived in the Castle. That's also good. The Sundial was also really good. But The Haunting of Hill House just was a fantastic, fantastic book. And even the movie they made about it in the 60s, 1963, I believe the first one came out. And that's easily one of my favorite horror movies. So scary, and they don't show anything, and that's what I really like. I like suggestive horror, where they don't show a lot of stuff. I think that's way creepier when it's all suggestion and subtlety. So that definitely her. I hope that, I mean, some of my stories are gory and disturbing and stuff like that, because I like that stuff too. But I've always kind of aspired to write things that stick with you. That like a week later, you're thinking about it and you're like, man, that was messed up, or you're scared to go to sleep because you're thinking about it. And I don't know how well I've succeeded in doing that, but that's really what I'm trying. I'm trying to do like Clive Barker did for me, or like David Lynch did for me, where many years later I was like, man, that was so disturbing, or that was so creepy, and it just makes you think about it like even much later. So, I'm kind of trying to write enjoyable horror too, but I want something that really sticks with people and kind of disturbs them and makes them think about it long after they finish reading it. I have a site that's just www.jennyashford.com, and I also have a horror blog, goddessofhellfire.com, and all my books are on Amazon. All the fiction is in print and ebook. The paranormal nonfiction is also an audiobook, and I'm going to do audiobook of the fiction too eventually, but it takes a while. And also, myself and my boyfriend Tom Ross we do a podcast called 13 O'Clock. And we just started it a couple months ago, but it's going pretty well so far. It's on the Project Entertainment Network, and it's just kind of like every different show is a different theme. We do just general weird stuff, paranormal, UFOs, serial killers, weird disappearances, like historical mysteries, that kind of thing. We did like occult Nazis. We did, original Night Stalker. We did all that kind of stuff. We just kind of sit around and kind of talk about it for an hour, and it's kind of a fun show. We have guests sometimes, but other than that, I mean, pretty much Google Jenny Ashford, and that's Jenny with a Y, and I'm kind of all over the place. Hi, this is Jenny Ashford. Check out my interview on acutiepie.com, a show with lots of artists and authors and other fun, creative people.